This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The fight over the county budget, plus a look back at Hurricane Elvis, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We are joined tonight by Wyatt Bunker, County Commissioner. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you. Also
Bill Dries, Senior Reporter with the Memphis Daily News. And Mike Ritz, also County Commissioner. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
You all just got through a tumultuous budget season. I think that's a word that was used a lot in its coverage. Commissioner Bunker, you voted against it. A simple question, why?
Well, in this day and time, insurance expenses are going up for our families and businesses across the board. Insurance, clothes, food, you name it. And so people are having to cut back in their homes and in their businesses to make ends meet. And I just believe that government should be doing the same. If we increase taxes on people, what we do is we prevent them from expanding their existing businesses and creating new businesses, in turn creating jobs for the people. That, in my opinion, is a bad thing. And if what you do is bad for the people, it's also bad for the county, and by default, it's also bad for the school system.
So what would you like to see? I mean, no one, very few people, let's say, like to pay more in taxes. You're talking about spending less, cutting. What should have been cut?
Well, there are people that were of the opinion that the schools cut enough and that so there should have been other cuts made in other areas of government. There are some that believe that it should have been fully funded. Whether you believe that schools had cut enough or not, we should have done what's necessary. We're in a position that is oftentimes characterized differently than we really are. We don't have support staff, financial staff that are behind us to delve into $1 billion budget and tell people exactly what needs to be cut, how many paper towels they need and all these different things in their individual departments. That's the administration, our executive branch of government, that has that responsibility. What we are charged with is to tell them how much the people can afford over a 12-month period. So the administration comes to us with a budget, we say yes or no, then they come to us with cuts if necessary, we say yes or no until we're satisfied. They try to dump that responsibility on us and say, well, if you're not going to vote for our budget, if you're not going to vote for the tax rate that we propose, then come up with the cuts. They know that's not our responsibility. We're not elected to do that, and that we don't have the staff to do it.
Okay, Commissioner Ritz, you voted for it. I would assume, no one really likes to vote for a tax increase necessarily or raise taxes on their constituents, but you did vote for it. You feel like it was a good budget and a good vote?
I think it was a good budget. We've got to remember that this year was a reappraisal year, so essentially 30 cents of the 36-cent tax increase was essentially just to get us even. Most of the people across the county, residential-wise, will not pay on basis of the county tax. 75% will not pay any more money to the county for taxes. However, we did add 6 cents to create $10 million to help the schools, to which we gave $20 million raise. We hadn't raised the school budget since 2006. And we also could have, I guess, cut some other things. Interestingly to me was that we did have a good number of people who voted no against the budget, almost without exception every time. Commissioner Bunker was one of those. But what we didn't have was a togetherness from that group as to what the administration should respond with. So the administration was never put in a position to essentially bring forward something else. I watched the process, frankly, and kind of smiled while it was going on, because there really was a lot of conversation. But it was never, in my opinion, directed to the administration to bring us a budget with, $10 million less. $10 million would have been 6 cents, for instance. So it was an interesting process to me.
Bill.
At one point, there was a proposal from Commissioner Rowland to go with a $4.32 tax rate, which would have been basically the certified rate, producing the same amount of revenue as county government got with the $4.02 rate. And it looked at that point, I think a lot of people were thinking $4.38 doesn't have 7 votes, neither does $4.02. What was your thinking on that? How did $4.32 fall apart?
Well, first of all, in my opinion, I was there, obviously that was a week ago, Wednesday morning. It sort of came out of the blue as a surprise. I think many commissioners who were supporting the $4.38, which is 36-cent tax increase, would have agreed to the $4.32 if they felt that that was the fallback position. I don't think the sponsor had checked to see where the mindset was. It was just essentially, here's something, you want to vote for this or not? And that didn't go over well, as you obviously noted. If in fact the commissioners who were not supporting at that moment, it looked like, the tax increase that we ended up approving, had indicated some support to move in that direction, it would have happened. But I think there was still confusion or in a non-firm commitment from at least 2 or maybe 3 of the commissioners who were in that group that made the difference.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Bunker, could you have supported, I realize we're in hindsight now, but could you have supported $4.32?
No, it would not. The reason is the reassessment, while they say over 70% of the residences went down in the county in their tax rate, the businesses, it was just the opposite. And the businesses are our producers. Over 70% of them went up. Also, your high-end residences went up. So what you're doing is most of the high-end residence owners are also the business owners. And so you're leaning harder on your producers in the county. When you lean harder on your producers, we go back to that same thing I opened with. Hey, they aren't going to be able to produce as many jobs. Your unemployment goes up, your poverty goes up.
Isn't it also, though, I mean, on the show, we often talk about this question, and there's, what makes a good community is partly, fundamentally what we're talking about. And people talk about the tax rate, and you're talking about the problems that causes for individuals and for businesses. But you've also got schools. People want good schools. Businesses want good schools, and crime. And a big chunk
let's look at that.
Yeah. So how do you balance that when you talk about cuts and you talk about funding? Everyone wants it all, and it costs a certain amount of money to provide the schools and to provide the public safety.
Well, if more funding equaled better schools, then I doubt few people would argue the fact. But what you're doing now is you're providing a higher per pupil expenditure, higher per student expenditure in the unified district than Shelby County had last year. They're not going to produce as good a product because they're operating less efficient. They have schools that they're operating at low census. They're operating with less teacher assistants in the classroom. Their pay scales, while they elevated those in some areas, they just didn't focus their money in the classroom like the county did. So your performance is not going to be as good as the county. It's really more than money. It's more the decisions of where you're going to focus that money, how you're going to use it accountably. We brought up small things and big things to cut. One of the smaller things we brought up, which was just a small sign of maybe a bigger problem, was the fact that their security director was paid $175,000. He has 120 or whatever employees underneath him. He's paid considerably more than the director of the Memphis Police Department, who has thousands of employees.
Right. Well, so when we look ahead, and we should say you're running for, I think you're declared running for mayor of Lakeland for this fall. Yes, Lakeland has voted to break off and form its own school system a year from now. Is that, I assume you were in favor of that move on the part of Lakeland. And you feel like Lakeland can manage its school system more efficiently than the bigger school system?
Local control is typically, not always, but typically better in education. They perform better. When you get a school system that gets beyond 40,000 students, across the board, it's very typical to see that school system lower performing. your better performing school systems, your local controlled smaller systems.
And are you comfortable, so let's look ahead a few years, let's assume that Lakeland, I mean, there's some talk that maybe Lakeland and Arlington will pair up to do this. Without getting too far into the details, are you comfortable as you look 2, 3, 4 years ahead that the tax base of Lakeland can support its own local school system? Because some folks, including the man sitting next to you, have raised concerns about any of the suburbs really being able to afford the school systems they're about to create, at least at the projected tax rate.
Yeah, and we really appreciate the concern that we've heard from other cities about whether we can sustain our own school system. I'm absolutely confident we can. There's no doubt that we're going to have to partner with Arlington, pool our resources to provide a successful
But will those resources, I mean, will you see tax increases?
I doubt it. Looking at what we have in Lakeland, now I can't speak for Arlington or other municipalities, but what we have in Lakeland, I think if we spend accountably, we build our reserves, I think we can do with what we got. Now, that being said, we are going to have to partner with Lakeland to provide those resources for those children. There's no secret to that.
And Commissioner Ritz, you've raised a lot of concerns about the suburban school districts for, what, a year and a half, as long as this has been going on. I mean, that seems to be pretty clear that most all are going to break off. You represent at least part of Germantown. Germantown seems real clear they're moving ahead with their own school district.
Of course.
Do you have concerns about their funding? Do you still have those concerns that what's going to happen in terms of tax rates in the suburbs?
I do. I thought the reports that they all received from the same consultant identified the probable incomes pretty accurately at the time the report was done. I thought they considerably discounted and misrepresented, literally and in every respect, the expenses of the proposed school systems. Even their own reports, if you read them thoroughly, they use suburban or like Alcoa and Murfreesboro and other similar sized school systems for Bartlett, Caryville, and Germantown in their reports for those 3 cities, and they were spending in the range of $10,000 to $12,000 a student. I don't think either of those 3 suburbs are going to operate cheap systems.
Well, and we just saw in Germantown, and again, it's a reappraisal year for them too, but they did about a 50-cent tax increase. So they've got the municipality has a $2 rate. I mean, and then if your predictions are true, you could see Germantown with escalating property taxes over the next 5 years.
They raised the property tax 30%. Right. 30%. We raised ours less than 10 at the county level. The city of Germantown raised their property tax 30%, 44 cents. With no more money provided for schools. So the schools would be an add-on to that. So it's a pretty serious number.
I mean, is that cautionary for you?
Let's put that in perspective, though. Germantown, Caryville, Lakeland, Arlington, Millington, Bartlett all have compatible tax rates to their peer cities. Shelby County doesn't. Shelby County does not have a compatible property tax rate to other counties in Tennessee. It's much higher. And so you could make a better case if you were truly comparing apples to apples, and Shelby County's tax rate was between $2 and $3. But
we're not talking about Shelby County's tax rate vis-a-vis the school issue.
Yes, y'all are. The county mayor was talking about.
You interrupted me, Wyatt, and let me finish.
He gave me the floor.
He did.
The county tax rate. The mayor was talking about, well, 5 of the 6 suburban mayors Republican mayors have raised taxes. That's what he said. But he's basing that on, he's building a case trying to say, well, they raise taxes, we should raise taxes as well. We're not comparing apples and apples. When you look at tax rates that are comparable to the peer cities, then you look at Shelby counties and it's far off. I mean, we're much higher than other counties in Tennessee, and Mike Ritz knows that.
Commissioner Ritz.
I appreciate not being interrupted, and I don't appreciate you allowing him to interrupt me. I'm going to say that.
Well, let me say this.
Well, wait.
First of all, you gave me the floor.
Commissioner Bunker, hold on. Let's not get hung up on that. No, we have lots of time. Okay, we have lots of time.
Thank you.
Go ahead and respond.
The point I was making is this: the suburbs of similar size who run school systems of similar size that these will be running in Bartlett, Germantown, and Caryville. Those are the 3 big ones. Had ongoing operating expenses considerably higher, usually in the range of $2,000 or $3,000 per student than the consultants used in their reports. If the cities operate like Alcoa, Murfreesboro, and some of these other similar sized cities, their suburban school systems at the same way, and those are, I'm sure, well run, fiscally carefully looked after school systems, they're going to have to raise the property tax. It has nothing to do with the county's property tax. They're going to have to raise their property taxes anywhere from 84 cents to $3.91. And that's a big increase of property taxes.
Isn't that, I mean, if you compare, I mean, I've heard people do this. If you compare the, the private school, what the private schools in Shelby County spend, MUS, St. Mary's, some of the ones that people identify as, quote unquote, the best. The average tuition, you can go on and on. It's around $15,000 to $18,000. Don't you think that the people of Germantown, the people of Lakeland, the people of Arlington, once they get their own school systems, they're going to want this really world-class education, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get there? And isn't that in part what he's saying, that the people of Germantown are going to say, look, we want to be as good as Murfreesboro, these other peer cities, and it costs a lot of money, and isn't that potentially what's going to happen in the suburbs?
Even the smaller cities in the suburbs, especially when they partner with other cities like Arlington, Lakeland, Arlington partner, we're going to have a much larger student body than MUS or Briarcrest. I mean, you got to remember, they're not under one school system.
Sure.
They're all separate schools. And so their tuition pays for their administrative staff and so on.
Okay.
We are talking about having a lot less support staff than, your typical Shelby County schools or your unified school district as it's currently known. And so your expenses are going to be lower. We'll have to operate that school system efficiently, not cheaply, as Commissioner Ritz suggested. But the comparison, back to the comparisons of the tax rates in the county and the cities, our tax rates, 30% of $1.20 is still less than the 36 cents that they raise the county rate.
Okay.
And what that does is it creates a position where some people are going to lose their businesses. Some people aren't going to be able to afford to pay their taxes on their homes. And so you're going to have people in this county that are going to go unemployed, and you're going to have people lose their homes because of the decision that Mike Ritz
or isn't your
made.
fear also that they'll move to Fayette County, they'll move to Tipton County, they'll move
exactly.
to Suffolk County? Okay.
And that's the decision they made.
Commissioner, you want to respond? I want to make sure I give everybody.
Yeah, I think these comments have been made repeatedly by Commissioner Bunker today and in the past, but the point is this: he and his friends did not bring forward any significant cuts to have the county commission consider. For instance, we know from the material that was given to us just a week ago Wednesday that if we had had to cut $10 million, 6 cents from the county's budget to get to the $4.32 tax rate that Commissioner Rowland suggested, as you noted, Mr. Dree, that there would have been half the cuts would have come from the Sheriff's Department in the form of at least 200 deputy sheriffs. Now, I don't believe there's a snowball's chance that Commissioner Bunker and others on the county commission who are advocating the cut were going to stand by and watch that happen.
Okay. All right. Bill.
Do you think that the county's property tax rate contributes to an exodus, and do you think it will hurt small businesses who are assessed at a higher rate?
No, I don't. The impact of the 36-cent increase on commercial property values is infinitesimal. It's in the range of less than 1% of the property tax these people pay. It's like 1/7 of 1%. Now, it's not insignificant, and having the highest property tax rate in the state of Tennessee is nothing to brag about. We have peculiar needs in this county, and the county is obligated to run 40 courtrooms, a large sheriff, a health department. We put $27 million a year in the med. The state should be doing more in that regard. There's a lot of issues here, but we can't turn our back on the people who look to the government to take care of these things and not do minimal activities. This is not a Cadillac operation downtown.
Commissioner Bunker,
I would agree with that, but it costs like a Cadillac operation downtown. That's my objection to it. Go ahead.
But just a minute and a half left.
Your point on this has been that costs are going up for taxpayers. They're going up for governments as well because they're buying.
See, let me say this. I know Commissioner Ritz claims that he doesn't believe people are going to leave town or whatever, and that may be so in his gated community in Germantown, but I've been walking door to door in the common community, and I can tell you people are planning on leaving. They're putting sale signs on their lawns. I've been going door to door for Lakeland Mayor, and I can tell you they are talking about leaving this county, and they will.
Do you have a couple more minutes to talk? We're going to, if you do, what we'll do is we'll go to the web because we're going to cut and go to our segment on Hurricane Elvis. So what we'll do here, we'll continue this conversation. It's a good debate on the web. Go to WKNO.org and we'll have another 5 minutes or so to kind of wrap up some of these questions. But coming up, we've got a look back at Hurricane Elvis 10 years later. Stay tuned. We are joined now by Christopher Blank, News Director for WKNO FM. Thank you for being here. And we're going to talk a little bit about Hurricane Elvis 10 years ago this week. We all have memories of how bad that was. You did a piece on it. Tell us what you found.
That's right. Well, you know, last Monday was July 22nd, 10-year anniversary of the day that this derecho, which is it's a technical term for a straight line windstorm, hit the town about 6:30 in the morning and took out lots and lots of trees. You know, when you think of a hurricane or a tornado, you think of lots of structural damage done by flooding waters or just the wind ripping the roofs off buildings, as we've seen recently. That storm, most of the damage was caused by trees falling into houses, and there were more than 1 million cubic yards of debris caused by that particular storm. It was a terrible storm as far as property damage. There was more than $500 million in total property damage and cleanup done with that one storm.
And Bill, you were at the CA then, I think, and I remember I was at the Daily News, but just as a person living here, it was the strangest thing because when you woke up or when that storm was happening, there were no sirens, and that's one thing that people talked about. Mm-hmm. That you didn't know, was this a hurricane? Is this just a bad storm? And then there was very little national coverage of it. You know, had the city been hit by a hurricane that did that kind of damage that Christopher just talked about, we would have been on CNN and so on. But there wasn't a word. No one knew. I didn't even know the word was derecho, that's what hit us. People just said straight line winds. So it was a strange thing where we weren't getting the attention we thought we deserved based on what had happened.
Well, it actually heightened the effect of isolation. If you had power through this, you know, you would talk to your friends and you would go, "Isn't it awful?" If they were in another city, they would say, "What are you talking about?" So in some sense, it heightened the isolation from this. And yeah, we're used to seeing this kind of damage with a tornado, even with tornadoes on a pretty limited basis, because tornadoes are really hit and miss. I mean, I think we've all seen tornado destruction where one house is demolished, the one next to it is standing. That wasn't the case with Hurricane Elvis at all.
Although there are the weird things, I mean, other people may have this in their neighborhoods. Where I live in Midtown, our street was not hit very hard. Where I live now, I didn't live there then. But you go one block over, and there are a really dramatic lack of trees in Central Gardens. And I asked someone after I'd lived in the neighborhood for a couple of years, it's because no, that street, one street over, lost 10 trees, but our street lost maybe one. It's just an interesting thing in which the way it marked the city.
Yeah. Well, you know, it also marked our public utilities for years, and it also marked the storm marked the National Weather Service, you know, which is based out in Shelby Farms. And after that storm, both of those organizations kind of regrouped and started looking at new ways of addressing big storms like that. For one, the National Weather Service, they weren't expecting this storm to hit. And the reason tornado sirens didn't go off was because, you know, at the time, you could only alert the sirens to go off if there was a tornado coming. Now, after Hurricane Elvis, they can put the alert on.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they weren't technically allowed to turn on the tornado sirens unless there was a funnel cloud. Well, but that wasn't a funnel cloud.
So did they know it was happening as it happened?
They knew it was coming in. They knew that there was a big thunderstorm coming in. Another thing that they did was they started adding impact warnings to storms, which allows them to say, this storm is coming in, it has this type of winds, and it could blow the roof off your house. It could kill you. So they didn't have those type of warnings before. That wasn't exactly caused by Hurricane Elvis, but it comes in the wake of it after seeing storms like this, which take people by surprise and nobody knows how to prepare for it.
All right.
As far as MLGW goes, they did a lot of changes to their own organization in terms of creating an emergency management center, a crisis center, whenever a big storm hits, and in the way they interact with people. You know, the big thing after the storm, as Bill mentioned, was that people didn't know when their power was going to turn on. So now they're much more active in letting people know that.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, Christopher. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.